Hi, it's Pippa from the Advantage here, Specialist Support Services for girls and women with ADHD. The topic of today's video is dating, which was a special request, and I'm making it, I think, with younger ADHD women in mind, but maybe more mature women might find it useful. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments. I have to admit that I have been happily married for 22 years. I married my husband when I was 24, which was a long time ago. So it's actually, well, an age, I guess, since I was dating. So in order to make this video, I asked some other women with ADHD who have more recent dating experience for their kind of advice, their tips. And I will say, when I read the comments, it did take me back. I did recognise my younger dating self there. So this video is about the hazards then, or the pitfalls that may sabotage dating for younger women or any woman with ADHD. So the first two things I'm going to talk about are core symptoms of ADHD. So the first one is impulsivity. Now, it does tend to be the case that that women get better over their lifespan at managing their impulsivity, but it is likely that it is there within you, manifesting itself somehow. You need to be aware of that, and if you're listening to this thinking, what's she on about? You need to ask. You need to ask your family, you need to ask your friends, where do they see the impulsivity? Because if you know where it is, then you stand a hope of putting it into check so it doesn't wreck your dating experience. So we can be impulsive by blurting out our thoughts, by interrupting, which can make us look quite rude and thoughtless and unkind, which we are definitely not. It might manifest itself in agreeing to things just because we want to please the other person, and I 100% recognise myself in that way. You know, women with ADHD can be chronic people pleasers, and obviously that is quite a hazard if you are dating, because you basically agree to anything that the other person says because you want their acceptance, you want them to value you, you want them to like you, I guess. But then we run the risk of putting ourselves in an uncomfortable position, making ourselves do and be things that are not sort of true to our character. So watch out for that. So work out where your impulsivity is manifest, and consider how that might come across in dating, and think about how you might rein it in. The second core symptom of ADHD that I think is massively important for dating, of course, is attention. Now, if another human being is lucky enough to be on a date with us, well, then they have our attention, right? And that is the greatest gift we can give. And if they are all sexy and sparkly and novel, our hyperfocus is likely to kick in, but that can tip into obsession. Again, I have to admit, I recognise my younger self right there. This person can become your everything. Your thoughts are filled with them all of the time. You long to be in their company. You're replaying conversations in your head. You could become actually a bit of a nuisance, maybe a bit of a stalker. And no human being likes to be the object of an obsession. And if we allow our hyperfocus to go unchecked, we're in danger of that. So watch out. We can make ourselves incredibly unattractive by, chasing, calling, texting, following on a map, or actually live in person. All of these things are really unhealthy. So watch out for your hyperfocus kicking in, and that it could tip into obsession. Now, the other thing about attention is kind of, it's like it's hyper focus, or it's like, oh my days, I'm so bored. Both of these things are really tricky when we're dating. So like, maybe last week they were all sexy, sparkly and shiny and novel. And, like maybe on week sort of 3 or 4, you're like, oh, okay, this is getting a bit dull now, and maybe I'm starting to feel a bit bored. It is true that if we are made to do the same things over and over again with the same people over and over again, that can be a bit torturous to us. And then impulsively we might ditch them because we want to move on again to find something sexy, sparkly, novel, and then we are in a ridiculous pattern of kind of serial monogamy, really. We need to be aware that we have an interest-based nervous system, and that when our interest is engaged, we can give 100%. But if we allow ourselves to lose interest, we are going to struggle. Now, it may be there's a very good reason for losing interest in this person and it's time to move on, in which case, fine. But that is not always the case. It might be that, for example, like the definition of an exclusive relationship is doing the same thing with the same person on repeat. That's what that is. So if you are aiming for an exclusive relationship, maybe growing into some sort of partnership, going forward into your future, you need to be aware that you have to decide, I suppose, to be interested, to continue to give your attention. So watch out for that. I think also another thing that can make dating difficult, probably for the other person, is that we can be a little bit all over the place, a bit all in or not at all, a bit up there, it's amazing, or down here, it's a car crash, terrible. We can be hard to predict. Our brain chemistry means that our mood, our emotion is quite fluid, and that's not our fault, but we need to be, first of all, aware of that, and then we need to find a way to help the other person, particularly if they don't have ADHD, sort of manage that and understand that it's not a reflection on them, it's just who we are. But that can make it difficult for people to be around us because they're not quite sure what they're going to get. Apparently, typical people are much more even. Okay, so if you had a date on Tuesday and you saw that person again on Thursday, you would be able to predict what you're going to get. But with ADHD, that's not always the case. So watch out for that. I think the final hazard that's been pointed out is that we can miss some of the small details, and that can be a problem. We might focus in on one detail about them that we think makes them amazing, and ignore other things which perhaps were red flags. If our instinct makes us aware of a red flag, we really need to listen to that and not think to ourselves, oh well, since he's a skydiver, it'll all be great. We need to try to see the whole big picture of this other person, to know whether they are worthy, frankly, of spending time with us. There is no point in wasting your time on someone that doesn't fully appreciate you and realise how lucky they are. Really, that's what I would say about that. But we need to have our eyes open and really try and see the big picture. I think the final thing I'd want to say is about communication. We can spend a lot of time replaying conversations in our head and situations in our head, or forward thinking them and what's going to happen and so on. I think that we need to be prepared to communicate clearly ourselves. What do I need? Why? Who am I? Why am I like this? We need to be able to communicate that clearly to the other person, and also we need to be able to listen to to what they're saying to us. If we're going to, you know, sort of have a happy dating relationship, clear communication, honest communication, authentic communication is vital. And sometimes the ADHD brain can sabotage that. So, so be aware. So I think that's kind of it in terms of potential hazards. In terms of if you have ADHD and you're dating someone that doesn't have ADHD, I think there are a few things to bear in mind. First of all, like I said earlier, the greatest gift you can give them is your attention, and you know it's our most precious resource, and by giving your attention to them, they are indeed incredibly lucky to have that, and we need to make an effort to do that. I think the second thing is that we need to work on our reliability. So if we struggle with timekeeping, with organisation, we need to own that to this other person, and we need to put things in place that enable us to be more reliable, because people with ADHD can, you know, let themselves down with being in the wrong place at the wrong time, that kind of thing, or being late and so on. And then the other person without ADHD can think, well, that's because she doesn't care. And that's not true. So so watch out for that. Try and work on ways, strategies, workarounds to make you more reliable. Another thing that I think your potential non-ADHD partner or date should be on the receiving end of is your warmth, is your affection. On the whole, we are incredibly warm people with so much to give, and I think that when we show that to another person, it means that the other potential problems of ADHD might be more forgivable, more easily overlooked. So I think that warmth, you know, showing your energy, your enthusiasm is a good thing. And sometimes women with ADHD, we have been told we're too much, and we try and rein ourselves in for fear of how it might come across. But honestly, I think if you are that thing, it's probably best to own it, because frankly it's exhausting hiding it. So yeah, showing warmth and appreciation. I think also respecting the other party who doesn't have ADHD. They are not like you, and they can't be, and vice versa. So the best that you can hope for really is that you can agree to manage that respectfully. There is nothing to be gained by losing control and slipping into defensive behaviour and being aggressive and so on. That's not going to bring any joy. And if you're feeling aggrieved, there are better ways of managing it. For example, clear communication about your needs, than losing the plot and having a full-on meltdown in, I don't know, Pizza Express or something. If we are defensive about our brain, our behaviour, our too muchness, that is a barrier to really good communication. And frankly, at the heart of all successful relationships, dating or otherwise, there is clear and honest and authentic communication. So try not to allow your heckles to raise and to hide behind defensiveness. Instead, choose open communication. So they are I don't know, some thoughts about the hazards, some considerations if we're dating someone who doesn't have ADHD to bear in mind. I think my final thought though, and this is a pet theory of mine, is that we do tend to attract each other whether we know it or not. I mean, I didn't know I had ADHD. I wouldn't have suspected it in 100 years. But I do have ADHD, and my children have ADHD. And although my husband doesn't have a diagnosis, he certainly has all of the symptoms. I think we're drawn to each other, and I think actually when I look at a lot of my friends, they have ADHD too, and they are my friends because I just prefer people like that. So I don't know, maybe the final tip is, ladies, find someone with ADHD.